just get us into the presentation mode. So we probably should start with introductions. I'm Sarah Hansen. I'm one of the post-secondary counselors here, and I tend to work with the students that have counselors on the east side.
Yep, and my name is Dan Diambri. I'm one of the counselors on the east side of the building. And so tonight this is especially helpful for junior students because we're going to be talking about what students that are currently juniors can be doing between this time through summer all the way up through their senior year when they actually start applying and sending applications for colleges. So from now through the end of summer, going to talk a little bit about research that families can be doing on colleges that students are interested in. I'll talk a little bit about Naviance, which is our program that students and families can use to learn about colleges that they might be interested in. We'll talk about the importance of visiting colleges and then having a list of schools that they are coming into senior year already knowing that they might want to apply to. Talk a little bit about essays, standardized testing, and then once senior year begins in August, talking a little bit about the Common Application, letters of recommendations, deadlines, timelines, and we've got a bunch of different supports for seniors, probably the most amount of workshops, the most amount of help for a certain grade level, and it's really important at the start of the year because there's a lot of moving parts, lots of things going on. So by August, so if you are a junior in this room right now, these are things that you might want to be thinking about, and you should be thinking about from now through up until the first day of school. So I had mentioned that you want to come into the start of senior year kind of knowing what schools that you're going to want to apply to. We recommend about 5 to 10 schools to consider applying for. Could be less than that, could be maybe slightly more. We would say the max that you want to look at applying to is 15. One of the reasons for that is there's going to be essays that are going to be associated with all your college applications. So the more colleges that you decide to apply for, the more essays that you might end up having to write. And working on essays is something that we would recommend getting a start on over summer so that you're not overwhelmed when your senior year begins. You're going to want to look at application requirements, and I'll talk a little bit about where you can go to specifically see what is required for each college. You're going to want to create either create an email address that for your student that's not Stevenson related, if they don't have one already, because there are going to be certain platforms, certain programs that you're going to want to use that, and you're going to end up losing your Stevenson email address shortly after your senior year. So you don't want any of your Stevenson email addresses tied to systems that you're going to want to end up getting back into.
Stevenson doesn't forward the child's email to the forwarding?
For a few months it does, but I think
it's open for a few months, but then they deactivate all of the Stevenson emails. So there's no way of forwarding it. It will be deactivated. So that's why we encourage anytime they're working with outside entities, they should be using a new email that they have access to.
And what is the message someone would receive if they try to email the student?
It's just do not delivered.
yeah, it would be as if the email doesn't exist.
And it doesn't get reassigned to another student later?
No,
It does not.
Okay.
because it's unique to their graduation year.
Okay, thank you.
When you are thinking through your list of colleges that you want to apply to, we do recommend creating an organizational system. So that could be something as easy as a Google spreadsheet where you're putting the names of the colleges and then what the requirements are, whether or not they need a letter of recommendation, anything that is anything that is pertinent and important to the student and their family would be a good idea to just keep that in one spot. Consider recommenders. So we'll talk a little bit about letters of recommendation a few slides from now, but that's something that students can start to think about as early as now, especially over the summer. Like, what teachers are they going to want to ask for letters? Do they need a letter from a teacher? Same thing with counselors. They're going to want to research and see what is required in terms of recommendations. And then set up times to communicate as a family. So I have run into a few times this year where student thinking they're absolutely going to apply to these colleges and they want to go to this school, and their parents are kind of on different pages. So it's really important to set a time to be able to talk through what everybody's thinking so that there are no surprises during application time. So I mentioned that the goal is to kind of look at maybe applying to 5 to 10 schools, 15 at the max. But we want to make sure that we are looking at different buckets for those, 5 to 15 schools that we might be applying to. So these are the 3 that we have designated that we'll talk through. Students have probably heard these categories before, but we have a safety/likely category. These would be schools that if a student applied to, they would kind of be shocked if they didn't get in. It should be a slam dunk for admission, financially reasonable. These are schools where students have looked up to see where they fall in terms of other students that have applied and gotten in. A target would be a student meets admission requirements, it's financially attainable, and they have their scores, their GPA, everything that those schools are looking for is right in range with what that student has been able to show. And then the last category, unpredictable or reach. These are students that might apply to these schools that might have requirements that are deficient. It's a financial reach, might be really expensive. They're highly selective, so highly selective colleges are going to be those in which admit 25% or less. And I can't even really say that these are for students that don't have the GPAs or don't have the test scores, or because really lots of students that have really high scores, really high GPAs, and they still apply to these schools, and they unfortunately still don't get in, and that's why we call it unpredictable. So I think the next logical question is, how do I know? If I'm a student, how do I know what schools fall into those buckets for me, right? And so if we're looking at the likely or reach categories, this is a scattergram plot. So this is data that students have access to right now in that Naviance program, the program where students can log in and learn about different colleges. This is Stevenson student-related data of the last couple of years, which will show whether or not students got admitted or denied to this school. So this particular school, does it say, oh yeah, this is Illinois State. So this is a snapshot of all Stevenson students over the last couple of years, and the green check mark is they got in, the red X's are they did not, and if a student logs in, they're gonna see this little blue dot that shows them where they land right now based on GPA and based on their standardized test score. So you can see why this would be an example of a likely school, because we see a whole lot of green over here. So they'd have a better chance of being able to get in. So that would be considered like a slam dunk school for them, yeah.
Is that the weighted or unweighted GPA?
It has both, I think.
Yes, but we encourage you to use the weighted because that factors in rigor.
So this one is the weighted?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, oh, actually, and yeah, so you can actually toggle between it. So if you wanted to switch it, you can. You can also switch it between students that took the SAT versus the ACT.
But we would recommend for our juniors right now to definitely stay with the SAT data because the past 2 years of Stevenson students have taken the SAT way more than the ACT, so they can just convert their ACT over to an SAT. There's a simple correspondence chart that you can find online. And then we encourage you to keep to weighted because weighted factors in rigor of courses. Rigor is very important in the more selective schools for sure.
Okay, and I can't quite remember if it's about 12, those lines are about 1,200 and 3.2?
About 3.6, and this is relative to each school. So as you
Right.
pull up Naviance, you'll be able to see
For the
those.
schools, Illinois State University, it's 3.6, and what is the SAT?
Well, that's an average. I wouldn't look at the average. I look at mode because to me that's more important of where do we see consistency in admission, not where is the average, because we have lots of high achieving students at Stevenson, so those averages are skewed. It doesn't mean that's what you need. I would look to see where does your student fall on this chart. Are they in a sea of green? Then we would call it safety.
This is Ohio State University. So this, we're landing here. We're still in the green, but we're starting to see some of the red X's start to creep into play. So this is why we would designate this as more of a target school. We still should be in pretty good shape, but we do see red X's all, kind of around. So it's not a slam dunk like that first category was. And then this is going to be University of Michigan. And our dot is here. So if I was a student logging in, this is where our example says here. And you can see, like, there's, even if you were all the way up here, it would still be difficult to say that this is a target school because it's just so unpredictable. There's red all over the map that, even assuming that this is a target, it is difficult to do. And that's why we want to really make sure that students are looking in all three of those categories. So if you're going to apply for about 10 schools, 3 in each, somewhere around there, so that you feel like you've got a good balance. Question?
What are those blue circles and green?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So the blue circular ones, these are students that were waitlisted. So they didn't have a firm decision at the time that we uploaded the data. Reminders. So, like looking at those scattergram plots, it's important to know that there are not many highly selective schools, and there's a ton of colleges in the United States that are going to be able to well prepare students for their plans, for what they want to do. So I don't want that last graph to be discouraging, because you saw a lot of red, you saw a lot of denials on there, which is why we want to make sure that students are spending as much time on that last category as they are on the middle one and the likely category. That third bullet point is really important too. I've got lots of students that they're putting schools on their list just because somebody told them about it, or they're not as enthused about it. That might end up being a school that they end up going to. So we do, whether it's the likely category or the unpredictable category, we want to make sure that students are putting schools that they could actually see themselves going to. And then that fourth one, college rankings do not equal student success. I feel like we have lots of students that end up getting in the weeds on rankings, or they end up searching different websites and US News and whatnot, and they have it in their head that only those schools are good ones, but really it's up to the family, it's up to the student as far as what they're looking for. There's lots of criteria that goes into what makes a good fit for a student, and so we don't want them just looking at those rankings. And we want to be optimistic and realistic and diversify the list. So that's probably something you'll hear a bunch tonight, is we want to make sure that we're having a balance between those unpredictable schools and the likely schools. So how do we research? So there's a few different ways that we can go about researching and seeing where we land in those different categories. Naviance is a really, really important tool. We have been talking with students about that tool since their freshman year. Those are where you could find those scattergram plots. You can get to Naviance by going to the College Career Center website, and then there's a big block icon there for Naviance. There aren't parent logins, but students have their logins, so we always encourage students to meet with the parents, either share credentials or just have them log in, and you guys can look at it together. We also have, so the Naviance is going to be very specific to offering Stevenson specific data, whereas some of these other websites, College Board, Big Future, those are also great resources. The data information on there is going to be more global. We also encourage students to attend college fairs, college rep visits, and of course visiting colleges in person. So rep visits are something that we have offered to juniors this year. If you're a junior student in here, raise your hand. Did anybody go to any of the rep visits? Okay, so maybe a couple students. So those rep visits take place first semester junior year, first semester senior year. We have about 150 colleges that we have a representative from those schools come to Stevenson. Students can sign up to not meet with the rep, but to be able to listen to a presentation by a rep if they're interested in that school. They happen all throughout the day, so we do ask that if students want to go to a session, that they ask their classroom teacher if that presentation is happening during a class to get permission to go. We ask that students do that 48 hours in advance. Usually teachers will say yes, but there might be days where there's a test or a student's been absent a lot, so we want to make sure that they're in class, so that's why it's important for them to ask. And so if you're a current junior right now, you'll still have this opportunity at the start of next year to do that. We send the list out to all students in August where they can look at the big list and kind of go through and see, this is a school that I'd like to learn more about, and then that rep visit will come on the date that's noted on the sheet. For summer, I would say this is a great time to be able to visit colleges, attend information sessions. If schools are far away, if you're looking at applying to a school in a different state, it might be harder to visit, which is why there's a lot of good virtual options that you can log into and listen to somebody give a guided tour. And then we've got a really great College Career Center resource page. If you go to d125.org, and at the top there's a bunch of menu items. You go to academics and then College Career Center. And then we have a whole bunch of different presentations about financial aid. If you went to any of the junior nights this year, we post the videos from our College Career Center nights. So lots of good information here. This QR code here would actually bring you to the list for students to look at the rep visits that took place this year. We usually have the same.
Yeah, we'll update that list, and it happens kind of rapidly in August, September, and October. So they're not all scheduling at the same time, but they will call throughout the fall to schedule. So you'll see that same Google Doc will get updated. I'm going to add a little bit onto the college information session. So I have a junior myself. She goes here. We're eyeball deep in trying to understand the visits and the information. Not only is it important to do these like virtual information sessions or the sessions on the campus, but you can also do sessions within the department that your student is looking to study. And to me, that's most important. Like for my daughter, I want to know, what is this particular program going to offer her differently than another program? What does that return on investment look like for us? How are they helping her get experiences? How are they helping her with careers? Do they have a master's program that can get wrapped up in one more year and save me a little money? And what does that outcome rate look for that? So the research is really important, because that is really going to help you get to the bottom of what these schools are offering and how they offer it, and how is it different from one school to another, and how does that fit your students' learning style and what they're looking for their overall experience to feel like. So I know it's a lot of work. I feel like I'm constantly doing another virtual information session with my daughter, or another campus visit to go learn more about public health at this school. But it really helps us understand this is going to be a great fit, and I feel comfortable as a parent sending her here, where this school I'm a little worried she might get lost in the shuffle. So make sure you're taking those time to do that digging in that research.
What did you say gets scheduled throughout the year? What was the first part?
The college representatives will be calling in to schedule their visits in August, September, October.
Okay, and what happens in those?
So there are 45-minute sessions typically where the college rep will come in. They will give information about the school. They will talk a little bit about the application process. The sizes of those can vary. We can see some where it may be just one student, and so they really get a chance to really interact and talk deeply. And then obviously schools like University of Illinois, we're going to fill up an auditorium of 300-400 students, 500 students for that visit. So it is a great opportunity for students to hear a little more directly from the school at the convenience of during the school day.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note, if a student missed a presentation or they weren't able to go, that Naviance system where we had all the scattergram graphs, we do log notes. So we take notes on all of those rep visits when they come in and talk to students. They give a lot of information, so we don't expect the students to remember everything. And so we'll enter those notes into Naviance so that students and families can go back and read anything that they might have missed. Holistic admission. So we've talked a lot about, on that scattergram plot, we talked about how GPA and standardized test scores can factor into whether or not a student gets in. But lots of schools use a holistic approach where they end up wanting to look at more factors than just the transcript or just the standardized test score. It's still absolutely the most important part is the transcript and the grades and the rigor of classes that a student took. But these are some other factors as well. Testing. There are some schools that are test optional. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but testing can be a factor. I talked at the beginning about essays and how some schools are going to require multiple essays. Some might not require any extra essays, but how students write those can have a small factor into whether or not a student gets in or not. Co-curricular activities, so these colleges are going to want to see what a student has been doing their whole 4-year career, right? Are they only focused on their academics? Are they jumping out of their comfort zone, maybe doing a sport, maybe doing other clubs that they enjoy? They like to see students that have been involved in leadership activities in their clubs. It's not really a matter of how many clubs, it's not quantity, it's more the quality of the activity that they're involved in. And more times than not, a student's been involved in an activity for multiple years, 2, 3, 4 years, they're gonna have more opportunities to be able to have some type of leadership role in that club. Majors, obviously, as well, letters of recommendation, we'll talk about this on the next slide. Interest level, so points of contact prior to application. So this,
Do you want me to hit that a little bit?
yeah, I mean, this is gonna kind of depend on whether or not you've gone to their, sessions, or if they've been able to, if they've like clicked on their website, stuff like
So
that.
some of you maybe have heard a term called demonstrated interest, and it becomes this kind of beast of its own that sometimes our families think like students have to be like emailing reps weekly to contact them. Some of these schools, not a lot of them, they're usually the more selective schools or some of the private schools, want to know that students have genuine interest in them prior to applying. A lot of schools will know that students will send out a lot of applications. They're going to send out a bunch of yeses. Students get a bunch of yeses. They can only commit to one school. Schools want to know, is this student more likely to commit to us? This is why we hate rankings, because this all gets tied in the back end. It's called a yield rating. So some of these colleges really only want to admit students that they think are more likely to say yes back to them. And how do they know this? That's if they've had some point of contact with the school prior to applying. And that point of contact can look like all sorts of things. Maybe some of you did that Barrington High School college fair a couple weeks ago. If you went there, they were scanning your code. You had a barcode. If you go to a rep visit here, they're always signing in there. If you go to a virtual information session or an actual visit, all of those are different points of contact. And it's not that you have to have a bunch of those points of contact, but the colleges just want to know, like, are you actually interested in us, or are you just applying to a bunch of schools to see what happens? So that's what that interest level or demonstrated interest actually means.
Sorry, so we can go to college fairs at other high schools,
Yes, absolutely. Students can. Yeah.
and they can say, we're from Stevens?
Yeah, you're registering for college fairs in advance, and the student would register on something called StriveScan. They're going to get a barcode that is then scanned at each of those colleges that they stop and visit.
Okay, thank you.
And then just the additional items, sorry.
Oh, no, so yeah, additional items. So there might be some schools that want a portfolio. There's some that want interviews. I've had some schools or some students over the years that have applied to art schools. They want to see what some of their artwork looks like. So there might be some additional steps that certain colleges want as well. So how do you know what is on a certain college's checklist of what a student is going to need to have in order to apply? So these are 3 different schools. So U of I, Wisconsin, Northwestern, and we pulled some screenshots of exactly, number one, why it's important to go directly to the college website. So in addition to Naviance and Big Future and some of those other resources we talked about, probably the number one best thing that you can do is to go directly to the college's website to learn exactly what their updated procedures are, what their updated checklists look like. So Northwestern, for example, is going to have their checklist here where you can actually expand it. So it just says standardized test score, it says letters of recommendation, but if you click the caret, it will end up expanding down and it'll tell you exactly what types of letters. I believe standardized test scores, I believe that's optional at Northwestern. So it will tell you exactly what each school is looking for. U of I's, we just kind of typed it on there because they have a full page. It's kind of difficult to put it on the screen, but each college, if you search, will be able to find exactly what their checklist has. Okay, so letters of recommendation. There's 2 types of letters that a college might look for. There's a counselor letter and there's a teacher letter. It really depends on the school as to whether or not they are required, which is why we really tell students it's really important to check the websites to see if a counselor letter is required, if a teacher letter is required. If they are for teachers, they'll usually say like 1 to 2 or 1, or they'll say, we don't even read them. So for the counselor letter, we want to make sure that we are kind of talking about the student as a whole. It's not only going to be about academics, because that school can look at a student's academics. They can look at the transcript. So we have something called a brag sheet, which can be filled out electronically. And we talk to junior students, senior students about this, where they can scan that QR code, and we'll bring them to the electronic brag sheet where they can share with us, with the counselors, what they feel is most important, that they'd like shared in the letter. And oftentimes we'll then meet with the student one-on-one after they've submitted that brag sheet to go through that together with them and just make sure that we're hitting all the important points. Like as mentioned on there, there's many schools that don't want a counselor letter or a teacher letter, so it's really important to check the website to see what their checklists say. For teachers, we usually want students to, if a letter is required, to find a core teacher, so that could be science, social studies, math, preferably during their junior year, because that is the most recent teacher that they've had the full year. I feel like I have lots of students that want to go and only find a teacher that they got an A in, that they did really well in, but sometimes I tell students, like, it might be worth considering a class that maybe you struggled first semester and then you met with the teacher, he or she got to know you pretty well, and they can speak more deeply about you. So that's something to be considering, thinking about over the summer. If you've got a junior student right now, if there's a junior in here that knows exactly, like, yep, I really want to ask my junior year math teacher, you could theoretically ask before the end of this year, because teachers, they get asked a lot, so if you know that that's a teacher that you would like a letter from, you're more than welcome to ask them early. And lots of teachers, they're going to either want you to fill out their reflection sheet, which we have a QR code to here. It's also on the website. And I found that lots of teachers also have their own system. So there might be a teacher that it's kind of set up their own reflection sheet. So that's why you want to talk to your teachers earlier than later.
Is it only teacher and counselors? What about your coworker if you work?
Yeah, it's a good question. What's that?
Like, is it something they're gonna look into if it's like a place that you work in?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And that's why you check the websites to see exactly what they want. Typically, they are going to want, if they want a letter, they're going to want it from a counselor or teacher, but there is an alternate section for letters for activities or clubs or work that students can upload as well. But typically, these are going to be the two main ones. Yeah.
Yes, but on the counselor one, there seem to be different types of counselors here. So is that the main counselor? Who's the four-year, not the college counselor?
Correct.
Yeah,
It's a
correct.
generalist counselor that's been with them the entire duration.
Because we'll know them
Yeah.
best. We've had them for 4 years. And
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Essays is going to be another piece of the application process. So students typically, August, start of the year, will sign up for a program or a platform called Common App, which are going to have 7 essay prompts, and a student's going to end up picking one of those 7. That essay prompt is going to end up being sent to all of the schools that they apply to. There also, in that Common App, depending on the school, there might be additional questions that are asked that students can answer. There's a lot of why us questions, so like, why do you want to go to Champaign-Urbana? Why are you picking this major? How will you contribute to campus? So this is where it's really important to take your time with these essays. That's why we recommend students starting them over the summer. We want to make sure that these essays are not so much, I've got lots of students that talk about a story and they kind of get off track without talking about themselves or without really getting to the meat of why they want to go to that school or why they want to major. So we do recommend that students take their time, they get it checked over. We have lots of resources that students can go to help with that, one of which being this college essay workshop that's offered over the summer. Current juniors, there's still some spots available if students wanted to sign up today. We have 5 different times that it's offered over the summer. A couple of those are full, but we still have some time available in some of those sessions. The College Career Center will hold an essay writing workshop in the fall, so at the start of senior year. And then our ILC, ELC, English teachers, guided study teachers, counselors, we can also take a look at letters as well, essays as well.
Okay, so I think we transitioned to me to talk about the fun of standardized testing. I don't know whether it's better to stand or sit, 'cause I feel like I'm in the way of the slides when I stand, but I'll try to stand back here and move up to advance the slides. So we know our juniors just took that ACT a couple weeks ago. It is very important, juniors, if you didn't connect your student code into your ACT account, you definitely want to probably call ACT to get that taken care of, or you're not going to see your score when they come out. Rumor on the street is when they took the exam, it was going to be 4 to 8 weeks by the time it comes out, which is much slower than our standard Saturday administration, and that's because there's the writing part of it too that was part of ours. We do usually recommend that juniors take one of these exams 2, maybe 3 times is where we can see the best benefit. They might be a little more comfortable. In addition, they can potentially super score, which means schools might take the higher sub scores and then push them together. Colleges don't have a preference between ACT and SAT. I hear a lot, I want to get my score back and then maybe I'll do the June or July test for ACT, but those are actually getting quite booked in the area. I've heard some students going down to Lockport to try to take the July one. We will offer the September one here at Stevenson in the fall. You won't be able to register for that until over summer. They'll reopen for that next school year. The October one is really tight for deadlines, so I kind of call it the test of last resort. Like if you really, really want to try it one more time, that's one that you can take, but that score is going to come back very tight to those November 1st deadlines. And then the SAT, the June one, I know we're booked here. I'm not sure what's available in the area left, but we will offer an August and a September SAT here at Stevenson that students can sign up. And then at October 3rd, it'll be offered in the area. In order to sign up for these students, we need to go either to that College Board account for SAT or their ACT account. They're going to need a credit card. If you are on free and reduced lunch here, we can get fee waivers for you through the business office for those administrations.
When is the registration open for the July one?
For the July is already open. Yeah, so that's part of this year, and then the September will open usually after that July 11th date. Okay, so the, yes?
If students take them multiple times, will the school see all of those scores?
Students can share what they want. There's only a couple schools out there that require the entire testing history. That's Georgetown and Yale. Everybody else, students can choose what they want to share.
Oh, thank you.
So English proficiency exams, we know a lot of our families in here are first gen and maybe have moved here from other countries. This is an area where some of our students can get tripped up. So if our students haven't been in an English-speaking country and in an English-speaking school for the past 3 years, a lot of schools are going to want an English language proficiency exam. And that is not usually the ACT or the SAT. It's also not the access test that we give here. It's either like the IELTS, the TOEFL, Duolingo. And what we really recommend is that students go onto the college's websites to see what will the college take. And then you want to check all of the websites to see that because not everybody takes all 3 of these. So I know the Duolingo one tends to be more popular. It's more affordable. It's a little easier to take. But like UIC doesn't take Duolingo. So you want to definitely look at those schools and then plan to have that test by, I would say September, because again, that's going to come part of that admissions process for November. So you definitely want to check the requirements for that. So we're going to kind of move into senior year. I know we've kind of like bled into this a little bit as we've gone in, but let's kind of talk about what that senior year and supports look like for us. So, kind of over the summer, we see students start to open up that Common App, but there's really 3 different application systems that students may be looking at. Common App is the most popular and what students really should be using in like 99% of the time. Has over 1,000 schools from other countries. They also work with that one college, that one-click college admit that we've been emailing you guys about. And then I really tell students it's not one application that you're sending to a bunch of schools. It's more of an application management tool. It's one application that you're filling out a common part with all your personal information, but then as you add schools in, they're going to have many additional parts for each of those colleges. So it's kind of like a management tool. There is a program or an application out there called QuestBridge. This is really for a special subset of students, and we definitely want students to be aware of it, but also to know who is the right subset of students for this, because it is a lot of work and it does accelerate this process. You actually need to apply much earlier than you do for the schools through Common App. QuestBridge is really used for students that are very, very strong academically. So lots of APs, really strong grades in those, and also have a very high financial need. So usually a good indication is if you're on free and reduced lunch here, that probably is an indication for the financial need. So you need both of those. If you are in that situation as a student, then QuestBridge is a great application that kind of helps students get matched up with colleges. It's a whole process. But if you don't meet both of those, you really probably want to be using Common App. And then there's another application out there called the Coalition application. We honestly do not recommend that one at all. It's cumbersome. It's a little messy. Usually my students that are going to it are because they're applying to too many schools, because Common App will only let you apply to 20 schools. So if you max out that, and I know my students are going to Coalition, we have conversations quickly about you're applying to probably too many schools and there's no way you're doing those applications well. So we really recommend that students just stay away from Coalition.
Do the talk with each other to see if the same student
No.
has applied to
No,
different?
they do not know where else they have applied. So we're gonna, in the fall, we'll do an evening program for our parents, and we pull all of our students out the first week of English class to really talk about the steps and the nitty gritty of applying. But we give students kind of 2 overall deadlines. You're gonna see colleges have lots of different deadlines out there. It becomes really confusing. We really want students to work ahead of the deadlines because really there's like millions of people trying to hit submit in the same system that last week, and inevitably it will crash. So we try to work students ahead of deadlines for about 2 weeks. So our first deadline that is heavily recommended is this October 15th deadline. And that's for any school that students are using an early decision or an early action plan. It's for any public school that they're applying to. We really want them to use the early action and to be done by October 15th of anything they have control over. This is going to make sure that they get prime optimization at those schools. Like U of I will tell you 80% of their seats are given away in early action. And for many schools, it's where scholarship money is tied to. So we do want them to have everything kind of done that they have control over by October 15th. The second deadline that we discuss is this, go ahead, thanks, November 30th. So this is for any school that would be private, that they're applying regular or maybe rolling. But these are schools that oftentimes you're gonna see they have like a January 1st deadline, but we really want kids to be done with their applications, all 4-year schools, by the end of November. So it's like, you know, a period at the end of sentence, they move into December, they can focus on their finals, you know, kind of finishing up as strong as possible, and truly unplug over winter break. We hate to see students spending winter break trying to apply to a bunch more schools, plus we're not around, so if they run into problems, that becomes an issue as well. So these are the supports that we're going to be offering Stevenson students in the fall. Like I mentioned, that very first week, we're going to take their whole English class out, and I'll meet with my students, Mr. Miller will meet with his, and we're going to explain the nitty-gritty of how to apply. So we're going to explain how transcripts and letters of rec and test scores are getting to all these places. We're going to give them a walkthrough through Common App to answer all the questions that they don't know how to answer. And then again, we do a parent night for that, in-person Zoom and recorded to duplicate everything that we shared with them. And then, Naviance. Wait, I feel like we did a little kind of weird thing in here. I'm not sure why Naviance is in here randomly. I feel like we probably should have mentioned, that's probably the next slide. Sorry, I'm getting confused in here. No, all right, go back. I think I must have made a mistake on the slide. So we do a lot of optional workshops for students as well, which is not on the slide. So we will do things like walk them through Common App from start to finish. We will give them insider tips to University of Illinois. We will walk them through the California app if they're using that one. We do essay writing workshops. We have drop-in hours. We have open office hours. So we're very hands-on through the process of applying. And then, as we mentioned, the tutoring center will read essays. Mr. Miller and I will, but obviously there's 2 of us that work with all the seniors, so we could get booked up, but there's lots of people that are trained to help them with essay reads as well. And then the financial aid piece in here too. So just a reminder that that's going to open up in October. It is technically a graduation requirement. So you guys will hear a lot about it, but there's 3 ways to kind of meet that requirement. So we'll talk about those 3 ways plus the CSS profile. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. Any student who's a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, and there's some eligible non-citizens as well. They're eligible for that. The eligible non-citizens tend to be students that are here on visas that are like parolee, asylum seeking, refugee status. You know, many of our families are here on work visas. Students who are dependents on work visas are not going to be eligible for the FAFSA. There is a second way to meet that graduation requirement and to potentially get aid, which is called the Illinois Alternative Aid Form. This is a state aid form, it's not federal. And it's really designed for students who are undocumented or maybe on some of those visas that aren't eligible for the FAFSA, and the family has more high financial need. They become eligible potentially, depending on income of the family, for the MAP grant, which is eligible for Illinois schools only, so it can't be used outside of Illinois. The third way to meet that graduation requirement that we'll talk about is an opt-out form, and that's just a simple procedure if you aren't going to qualify or don't want to fill out either one of those. The CSS profile is a very different financial aid form. This is accepted about 400 schools. It would be in addition to the FAFSA if you're eligible to complete the FAFSA. It's really typically at those higher selective schools that have higher costs of attendance because they're going to give you a lot more money in gift aid, meaning grant money that you don't have to pay back.
but they want to do a very detailed deep dive into your finances that they're going to give you gift aid. So schools like Northwestern or WashU, or some of the Ivy League, they will require this CSS profile. We do not encourage you to just fill this out without knowing that the school wants it, because there is a fee involved in filling out the CSS profile, and there's the details involved in it. But you definitely want to be aware of it, and then if the school does take that as part of their financial aid process, anybody can complete that. It's not a federal form, it's a form through College Board that colleges use to help understand your finances. And if you're divorced, there is a non-custodial form that's going to be required, so both parents will need to complete that out. For the FAFSA, it's the parent that provides more than 50% of the financial support. We do have, one more thing. Oh, we have it on the slide, it's okay. So upcoming events that we're going to have for you guys next year. August 24th is that senior family night where we're going to go over those details that we shared with your seniors during that first week of school of how to apply. It's kind of like what I call part 3 in our series, where we had part 1 and 2 junior year, and this is like a ending note. And then we will do a financial aid night overview, and that's on September 28th. And both of those nights are in person, Zoom, and recorded. And then September 30th, I think, is our next First Gen night. And that one is, do you remember the venue for that one?
I believe it's going to be in person.
In person?
I
Okay.
believe, yeah.
And then October 14th, we will do a FAFSA and Alternative Illinois Aid Form workshop. And this is by appointment. So if you get to the point in October where you start to fill out that FAFSA and you're like, gosh, we need help, or we need help filling out that Illinois Alternative Aid Form, you can make an appointment through us, and we will actually sit down with an ISAC representative, which is the Illinois Student Aid Commission, which is a nonprofit that works in our state, to help families complete those forms. And then December 9th, which seems so far away, we will do a Zoom-only session for senior families talking about preparing for the admissions decisions and the next steps. And we'll talk about, like, if you get deferred, what that means, and what depositing means, and all of those different terms that come in there. Okay, and then we just had the students come through in April out of their math classes, so definitely talk to them about that. Oh, and this is kind of the slide that I was alluding to earlier. This is kind of our student event. So in the mid-August, again, we're going to pull them out of English classes, and then these are all the different workshops that we're going to offer that I mentioned earlier in the fall that they can take part of. They cannot miss class to come to any of these workshops, but we always offer them before school in each period, and we do our best to make sure that they're not against early bird classes, because we know our students often are taking those too. Is that it? Did I make it to the end?
Yep.
Haha, okay. So we have a few minutes, and you guys are welcome to questions, or if you have individual questions, you can come that up, but we thank you guys so much for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
watch the sunset with you tonight.